Small Things Like These is a historical drama about a man struggling to watch a convent commit crimes against humanity. It's pretty solemn, but it has a strong statement underneath. Let's talk about it. This movie takes place in the 80s, where we follow Bill Furlong, played by Cillian Murphy. He's a businessman selling coal in the small Irish town of New Moss, which is a town heavily influenced by the local convent. Bill frequently delivers coal to a Magdalene laundry here, where he sees young girls being treated with very questionable dominance. This brings out his memories of his mother and his childhood, which leads him to wonder if there's something he should be doing to help. So for those of you unfamiliar with what Magdalene laundries are, they were institutions of the Catholic Church that ran for hundreds of years through the 20th century, confining teenage girls who had lost their purity in some way, and typically against their own will. They were more or less prisons for teenage girls. The occupants made very little money for their labor, and they were sometimes treated viciously. So Bill Furlong gets glimpses of how the convent is treating these young women, and it does not sit well with him at all. Part of this is because of his childhood experiences that pertain to the power that the church had over the community, but also because he's just a good guy. If we had to describe him in just one word, it would absolutely be selfless. He's incredibly considerate of other people in his community, so seeing these young ladies being treated poorly leads him to question what he should do. Which leads us to the movie's core subject, which is complicity. This movie shines a light on the ways that people turn the other cheek to injustice on behalf of keeping their hands clean. We even get close-ups of Bill washing his hands at the end of every day, serving as a double entendre that reflects this. He washes the dirt from his hands at the same time that he washes his hands of the situation so that he can try and relax at home. The key word there is try, though. He tries to mind his own business, but he can't help but feel guilty because he thinks he should be doing something. It speaks to his character. He's a guy who has endured some hardships, so he knows all too well the impact that small gestures can have on a person. Having been affected by the influence that the convent has in the community, he struggles going about his life ignoring how it's affected others. He also struggles because, as a father of 5 girls, he has the thought, what if that was one of my girls in there? These struggles are what carry the movie. Bill bears a lot of emotional weight, and we see that in Cillian Murphy's performance. It's a very subtle performance, but there are so many layers to it. Sometimes it might feel like he's expressionless, but there are moments where you can tell what he's thinking or feeling. He's sometimes haunted by his childhood memories and unresolved trauma. Other times he's conflicted about how to handle the church's corruption. It's a solid performance. I gotta say, if Cillian Murphy keeps this up, he might end up typecasting himself as a man who just plays deeply disturbed characters, because he is very good at it. Another layer to his struggle is the fact that he is a man of faith, so his ambivalence about the institution is furthered by the fact that he does show the church some support. The movie does not demonize the Catholic Church by any means. If anything, it's just trying to show viewers how the church has previously distorted some of its teachings. There's one scene that subtly alludes to this, where Sister Mary, played by Emily Watson, is leading prayers and prompting for a collective response. The church is responding in unison, but the scene is cut short before they chant their last response, as a way of suggesting that perhaps this last message of Sister Mary's is flawed or distorted. The movie has a lot of subtle creative choices like this that really make it a lot more interesting. That's important to note because it's really quiet and somber overall. There's very little music, a lot of scenes go by where Bill doesn't say much of anything, and there are a lot of pregnant pauses in between. Couple this with subject matter that isn't exactly what you'd call the ingredients that make up for your average spectacle film, and the results are what some viewers might consider to be a little bit boring. I personally find movies like this to be a nice change of pace. I really enjoy soft, meditative films. That said, there were a few areas here that left me a little bit thirsty. For example, ostracization is a topic that gets brought up throughout the film. It kind of felt like they were leading up to something with that, but it also has its moments where it feels a little bit uneventful or even repetitive, mainly because we keep seeing Bill go about his business and his home life. The repetition is supposed to place emphasis on how taxing it is to have these dark experiences day after day, which might be tiresome if you're not thinking about what everything means. It's really meant to be a visceral experience. It's a humanist story that aims to get you to feel for the characters rather than being a story that hinges on thrills or consequences. I could get behind the idea of this movie playing out like a thriller, but I absolutely respect it for the approach that it did take. It's meant to be more uplifting rather than being relentlessly grim. And the tempo, thankfully, isn't slow. Sometimes somber films can feel very sluggish, but this one is thankfully up to pace, so the movie didn't overstay its welcome by any means. Like most historical films about complicity, it's a little bit of a history lesson, but it's also so much more than that because complicity is unfortunately timeless. When you consider the fact that it wasn't really that long ago that these institutions were still operational, it makes you realize that such inhumane practices are not a thing of the past. Movies like this usually paint a picture of what complicit behavior looks like to give viewers an idea of how they may or may not be complicit in their own lives. It's a way of trying to send a message without being preachy about particular subjects that might be comparable to the subject matter. So in the same vein, I will spare you the lecture on how you can be more mindful in your own life today and simply say that the small things we do for others can have large impacts on their lives. It's a solid message from a solid movie. I'd say it's pretty good. If you're down to watch something very quiet and contemplative, this one's worth watching. But if you're looking for something with intensity and big bombshells in the story, this one might not be what you're looking for. Thank you for watching this review. If it brought you any value at all, please give it a like. It really does help the channel grow. I'll see you later this week with my review of A Real Pain.